Welcome back to American Krishna. I'm Cyril Wohrer. I always mention the Vedic literatures or the literatures of ancient India. So we're going to go over the Wikipedia article on the Vedas so that you know what I'm talking about each time I introduce my videos by saying, hey, I explain famous verses from the Vedas or from the Vedic literatures. So here's the Wikipedia article. We'll go over it in a few minutes so that you get a gist of what we're talking about. And at the end of the video, you can click on a playlist of my own videos in which we go into depth into one specific Vedic literature is called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which belongs specifically to the Smriti category of Vedic scriptures. We'll explain it here because this article talks about it, as well as this really cool documentary, a 1-hour documentary. The link will be there too. I want to draw your attention to a couple of things here. So Vedas, right, literally means in Sanskrit language, basically means knowledge, right? A large body of religious texts originating in ancient India. Composed in Vedic Sanskrit, the texts constitute the oldest layer of Sanskrit literature and the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, right? As you know, I try to avoid the term Hinduism. As a matter of fact, you can click right here and see a video where I talk about whether, I am a Hindu or not, what's up with the term Hindu and Hinduism. But for all intent and purposes, in academic circles around the world, the word Hinduism as a category is used. So we're just going to go with it. You've got four main, when we're talking about Vedas or the Vedic scriptures, there's like basic four samhitas, which are like really authoritative. They fall into the category of scripture called Shruti. And let's go back to the article. There's a very important point here that I want you to see, namely that okay, there's the Shruti, which are, the really authoritative texts, especially for like traditional Hindus or those who are really into the caste conscious thing. Here, look, the corpus of Vedic texts or Sanskrit texts include the Samhitas. So I mentioned like the famous four Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, the Atharva Veda, right? And then you've got the Brahmanas, which are more like ritualistically descriptions of rituals that you perform. The Aranyakas, or the wilderness texts or forest treatises, not as famous, and especially the Upanishads. The Upanishads are super, super, super famous. Hence, you hear about the word Vedanta philosophy, right? So Vedanta is typically knowledge or explanations on the Upanishads, right? The Vedanta Sutra. And so you've got different Upanishads, the Brihad Aranyaka, you've got the Chandogya, the Katha, the Kena, the Aitareya, and others, right? And these, as the article says, are largely philosophical works, some in dialogue form. They are the foundation of Hindu philosophical thought and its diverse traditions, right? So, the Upanishads are really, really important. And interestingly enough, in this channel, I quote the Bhagavad Gita, right? So the Bhagavad Gita technically falls in another section of scriptures called Smriti, as you can see here. Smriti are not as so-called authoritative, but the Bhagavad Gita, even though it falls into the category of Smriti, the Bhagavad Gita is also known as the Gita Upanishad. In other words, the Bhagavad Gita is so influential, so important in terms of epistemological authority that even though technically it's a Smriti, which I'll explain what it is, or the actual article will explain it quite well, it's considered to be an Upanishad, even though it's technically a Smriti. Here, Shruti and Smriti, the difference. Let's go over that, and then we'll go over the last part, which talks about the authorship, which is interesting. Like, where do these Vedic scriptures come from, according to the tradition itself? So, Vedas are Shruti, or what is heard, distinguishing them from other religious texts, which are called Smriti, or what is remembered. In other words, Shruti is considered to be like revelations of reality to man, via these great enlightened sages, kind of like a revelation from God through Moses, kind of, And Smritis are more commentarial texts, like texts that are, commentarial, that make commentary on the original corpus of, authoritative texts such as the Vedas, right? But again, within that Smriti is, for example, the Bhagavad Gita and also the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Purana, which is extremely, extremely authoritative. For example, here the author says, among the widely known Shrutis include the Vedas, we saw that, and their embedded texts, the Samhitas, the Upanishads, we saw that. And the well-known Smritis include Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad Purana. Right, Bhagavad Purana is another name for the Srimad Bhagavatam. Again, you can go into the link at the end of this video that gives you a link to our in-depth study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 30 minutes of Bhagavatam reading, and of course the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These two epics, which are kind of like the equivalent of the Odyssey and the Iliad, are super, super famous and super, super authoritative. Again, even though they come in that category of texts called the Smritis, which technically are not as authoritative as the Shruti. Okay, two more things: authorship and transmission. Really important. So in terms of authorship, here's a key word: aupaurushaya. Aupaurushaya, which literally means not of man, or superhuman. Superhuman. So, Hindus are followers of the Vedic tradition, I prefer that term, or Sanatan Dharma people, really believe, as I humbly do, that the Vedas, so including the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Gita is spoken directly, supposedly, by God. I mean, it's probably, we could claim it's probably one of the, if not the only scripture on earth which is claimed to have been spoken directly, like it's actually God speaking, right? And the other Vedic texts, including the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, are aupaurushaya. In other words, they're not created by man. They're not man-made. They're revealed. They're coming down from above, from the man above. They're coming from above or from divine realms, from God himself, and are manifested in this world, right? So that's what the claim, what the truth claim is. And now this relates to our final point, transmission. Transmission. Okay, so if the Bhagavad Gita, for example, let's just go with it, was spoken by God himself approximately 5,000 years ago, as followers of the Bhagavad tradition claim, or at least 3,000 years ago, as even the most skeptic and atheistic scholars of Indology would say, how does that knowledge come to us after all these years? Well, here's a very, very, very important concept here called the parampara. Parampara means, you see, a sampradaya or parampara. The Vedas were originally transmitted, supposedly, since their composition in the Vedic period for several millennia. The authoritative transmission of the Vedas is by an oral tradition in a sampradaya, from father to son, or from teacher or guru to student, believed to be initiated by the Vedic rishis who heard the primordial sounds, right? As I mentioned, like these shruti are supposed to be like the original primordial sounds of creation itself, and from which, kind of like, again, to make a imperfect but still analogous analogy, in the beginning was the logos, or in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and so on. So there's this idea, again, of parampara, of I didn't show you, here we go, or the oral tradition, or sampradaya, right? That's what I meant, right? Sampradaya. So in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, in chapter 4, verse 34, Krishna says you should learn the truth by approaching spiritual teachers, and they can reveal knowledge or truth about this world to you, because they themselves have seen the truth. So there's this strong idea of a disciplic succession, a succession of teachers to students, to teachers, to students, generation after generation after generation. So there you go. That's what we talk about when we talk about the Vedic literatures, coming from the word Vedas, which again means knowledge. And I recommend you go to the following playlist so we can go deeper into one very, very important text, as I said, which is mentioned itself as the original, like the essence or the fruit of all the Vedic literatures, or the tree of all the Vedic literatures, namely the Bhagavad Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam. And by the same token, you can watch this very entertaining and very academically done documentary, again, on this famous text called the Bhagavad Purana by Dr. Graham Schweig and Dr. Valpe, who are also practitioners of the Bhakti tradition and for whom I have great respect and admiration. So there you go. That's a little intro to the word Vedic and Vedas and Vedic literatures.